By now, I'm assuming that most of you have seen Wonder Woman, and if you haven't yet, the short answer is go out and watch Wonder Woman. You won't regret it. This is my spoiler talk video for Wonder Woman. I'm going to be talking in depth about a few things that I loved in this movie, and if you haven't seen the movie, or if you don't want to know any spoilers yet, then you should probably click away from this video. I have a spoiler-free review of Wonder Woman. I will link that down below. Meantime, let's talk about this movie that gets better and better and better every single time that I've seen it, and I've seen it X amount of times because I don't want to tell you guys how many times I've seen it, because then you would probably look at me like I'm a fucking weirdo or something. Seriously, it's kind of embarrassing how many times I've seen this movie at this point, and I don't want to reveal that. But either way, I do want to get in detail with this thing. One of the things I couldn't talk about in my spoiler-free review was the Amazons. I wanted to save that for the spoiler review because the Amazons were one of the most badass parts of the movie. You have Hippolyta, you have Antiope, and Antiope herself, played by Robin Wright, is kind of a mentor slash aunt figure for Diana. They kicked a lot of ass. There's that great action sequence in the early going where they're facing off against the soldiers on the beach. There is a little bit too much slow-mo used on that part, but at the same time, I do feel like the slow-mo enhanced the action sequences in this movie, and in some movies it comes off as irritating, but it doesn't do it in this movie. Antiope in particular, I love the shot of her riding into battle, and I love the smile that she gets on her face. I love this shit-eating grin that she gets whenever she has to go into battle, whenever she's about to fight somebody. Yeah, it's just awesome. It reminds me a lot of the smirk that Diana gave when she was fighting Doomsday in Batman v Superman. You guys remember when Doomsday like bitch slapped her and she fell down and she was just smiling and she just gave him that, yeah, I love it, bring it on, dude. And I feel like Diana gets a lot of her competitive fighting spirit from the other Amazons, in particular from Antiope. Obviously, Steve crash landing on the beach is what led to this action sequence happening, and then throughout the rest of the movie, it pretty much focuses front and center on Diana and Steve and their journey back to the world of men and their efforts to try to stop this war, this huge war that's happening. Obviously, it's World War I. I called them magnetic in my spoiler-free review, but really every scene that they have together enhances their relationship and pushes it further. I love the scene in the early going where they're on the boat and they eventually end up talking about sex, and Diana, again, she doesn't really understand. She knows about certain things, but she doesn't really understand all the nuances of sleeping together, even if you're not together, and sleeping next to somebody that you're not with. That leads to some really well-placed comedy, and then you find out she knows all about sex, and I love the line at the end where she's like, well, I read these books and they basically told us that men are necessary for procreation, but when it comes to pleasure, not so necessary. If I'm a dude like Steve, I'm like, hey, you need this D, okay? You need this dick. This obviously pays off later on in the movie when they do eventually slap skins or have sex or whatever. I'm assuming they had sex. They didn't actually show them having sex. They started to make out and then there was a light on in a room, and so you're just assuming that something went down. I'll be honest, I probably would have lost a little bit of respect for Steve in that moment, because picture that, okay, Gal Gadot, we know she's like one of the sexiest women alive. She's fine as hell. She's gorgeous as shit in this movie. And, you know, they're having their chemistry. They have their dance outside when it starts snowing and everything's good. He escorts her back up to her room, and then she turns around and the look on her face, I swear to God, it melted me right in the theater as soon as I saw it. I would love it if any woman was looking at me this way, let alone Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot, her hair is falling a little bit into her face and she just has this look like, come get it, daddy. Steve, it looks like he's about to leave the room, and in that instant, I felt like I was gonna lose some respect for Steve. Like, seriously, dude, what are you doing? Don't do that. To the fine-ass woman like that, you're just gonna leave the room? Are you kidding me? Man, you better stay there and put the fear of Zeus in that pussy, come on! Luckily, he does stay, and then that's how the scene. I'm just saying, if it had turned out differently, I might have looked at the movie a little bit more negatively. One of the biggest things that I have found out while rewatching this movie is how similar it actually is to Man of Steel, which is the first movie in the DCEU. And you notice that visually, and then some lines of dialogue, and then the way, conceptually speaking, ideologically, there are a lot of similarities between Man of Steel and this movie. Case in point, in the early scenes where Hippolyta is telling that story to Diana, she's introducing the Amazonian heritage, she's telling Diana about her people, and she's telling her about a great villain that arose in the past that is eventually going to come back to haunt them later on. You contrast that with the scene in Man of Steel where Jor-El is telling Cal about his Kryptonian heritage, and then he introduces a great big villain that will come back to bear later on in the film.
Why did you send me here?
You came from Krypton. A world with a much harsher environment than Earth's.
I'm just saying that scene with Jor-El very similar to the scene with Hippolyta talking to Diana about Ares. Visually, there are some similarities. In Man of Steel, it's like this big, huge, glossy images and a whole bunch of I don't even know how to describe it. It just looks really cool where he's using the technology in the scout ship to show him what happened.
Eventually, our military leader, General Zod, attempted a coup.
In Wonder Woman, it's kind of presented like images in a book coming to life, and I thought that shit was really cool. There's also the visual imagery of Ares when he's talking to Wonder Woman, who, it turns out, spoiler alert, Diana is the god killer, not the sword, and she and Ares are actually brother and sister because Zeus, yeah, he was a man whore, and he slept with Hippolyta and left her a baby that would eventually grow to be powerful enough to take on Ares. So when Ares is talking to her about his big plan for humanity and he's trying to get her to see his point of view, it reminded me a lot of the scene in Man of Steel where Zod is inside Cal's head and he's trying to get him to join his plan. I mean, look at this scene from Man of Steel and then think back to the scene where Ares touches the lasso and creates visions in her head.
If Krypton lives again, what happens to Earth?
The foundation has to be built on something.
No. Zod. I can't be a part of this.
Then what can you be a part of?
No! I'm just saying it's pretty similar to me. Also, in that scene in Man of Steel, what does Clark say? When Zod reveals his plan, he starts sinking into this big graveyard of skulls, and what does Clark say? He says, hey man, I can't be a part of this. And in Wonder Woman, that's basically what she says. When Ares is revealing this to her, she goes, hey, I can't be a part of this. Some ideological similarities as well when you look at Jonathan Kent and how fearful he was for Clark to reveal himself to the world, to show his powers and stuff like that. You realize in the beginning of this movie, Hippolyta didn't even want to train Wonder Woman. She wanted to just keep her safe on Themyscira, and she just wanted to protect her that way. So in that sense, there's a similar ideology in terms of parents wanting to protect their kids, which I feel like is something that is very real, because I feel like that's what all parents would want to do. They would want to protect their kids. Obviously, we reached the big, huge finale. I mentioned in my spoiler-free review that there was a little bit too much CG on this part. Honestly, because you're so invested in the characters and because there's so much emotional stuff going on, like Steve sacrificing himself and giving the watch to Diana and his line of, I wish we had more time, it makes you more invested in it, and the more you watch it, the less you seem to notice the CG. And honestly, like I said, it's pretty good CG, so you can't really bitch about the quality. Wonder Woman basically turns OP in the end, and she starts wiping out all these soldiers with one hit. She picks up a tank, she almost drops it on Dr. Poison, which I'll be honest, in that moment, I probably would have just dropped the tank on Dr. Poison. I mean, she basically created the weapon that killed her first and only love. And I don't care that Dr. Poison might not deserve it or that Diana has to be better in that moment. If it were me, I might actually seriously consider dropping the thing on her head. I also love some of the little Easter eggs and some of the little callbacks and references. There's also a great scene in this movie where Diana experiences ice cream for the first time, and it should remind everyone of this scene from Justice League War.
Ice cream is wonderful.
Yo, pal, keep the change.
Thank you very much, sir.
What do you think?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
You should be very proud.
We get to the end of the movie, and this is another cool thing that I picked up while watching this movie, is that when she gets the picture from Bruce in the present day, and she sees the picture with Trevor, and she starts to type Bruce back, she's like, thanks for bringing him back to me. And it just kind of clicked at that moment. It's like, holy shit. In Batman v Superman, when she was looking for Luthor because she thought that Luthor knew where this picture was, you realize that she's just looking for the picture because it's her last picture of Steve. Like, it's her only picture of Steve. Oh my god, that adds such emotional subtext to her motivations and her actions in Batman v Superman. It's the only thing she has of Steve, and she didn't want to lose that. Oh my god, stuff like that make this movie enhance all the other movies in the DCEU. We get to the last moment, and this is the scene where I had a question, by the way, is, okay, she hears a noise off in the distance, she's like, well, I know my purpose now, and then she, like, basically jumps / flies off of the roof. A question that I have, does this tie into Justice League in any way? She clearly already knows about the threat because she tells Bruce, hey, not coming, Bruce, they're already here. So what if at the end of this movie that noise that she hears is like a boom tube, or it's parademons causing some trouble in Paris or wherever the hell she's living, and she springs into action, and that's how she hooks back up with Bruce, and that kind of how the Justice League happens. I don't know if that's actually a thing, I just think that that's a really cool connective thing if they want to try to go that route. In the end, guys, Wonder Woman gets better and better with every single viewing. I love this movie so much. I think it's probably my second favorite in the DCEU right now. Can't wait for a Wonder Woman 2. I don't mind if it takes place in present day or if it takes place in the past, maybe Vietnam, who knows? I want to see Cheeto and I want to see Cersei. I want to see one of those two in the sequel. Make it happen, Warner Brothers. Did you guys catch that logo intro, the new intro for the DC films? Awesome stuff, right? It should remind you of the Justice League animated series. Those are my spoiler-filled thoughts on Wonder Woman. I love this movie so much. Let me know what you thought about Wonder Woman. Let me know what your favorite film in the DCEU is thus far. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel, Wonder Woman.